Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the concept of happiness, something I think we're all chasing in one way or another. To help us unpack this complex topic, we're turning to The Art of Happiness, 10th Anniversary Edition. It's a collaboration between the Dalai Lama and Dr. Howard C. Cutler. Our mission today is to distill some key insights from this book about happiness, like what it really is, where it comes from, and how we can cultivate more of it in our own lives. You know, something that always gets me is how we're constantly bombarded with messages that happiness is about achieving certain things, like getting that promotion, buying that dream house, finding that perfect partner. But this book starts off with a pretty radical idea that the very purpose of life, according to both Eastern and Western philosophies, is happiness itself. It's fascinating.
Correct.
But initially, I have to admit, I was a bit skeptical. It sounded a little self-centered, like everyone should just focus on their own happiness.
It's a common misconception, actually. The book clarifies that this pursuit of happiness isn't about selfish indulgence. In fact, research has shown a correlation between happiness and positive social behavior. Happier people tend to be more sociable, more flexible, and even more forgiving.
So it's not about being happy at the expense of others. It's more like by cultivating our own happiness, we're actually better equipped to contribute to the happiness of others.
Exactly. It underscores the idea that personal well-being and positive social engagement go hand in hand. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Research suggests that while external factors like wealth or success do play a role in happiness, their impact on long-term happiness is surprisingly limited.
So winning the lottery might give us a temporary boost,
Yeah.
but it won't magically solve all our problems or guarantee lasting happiness.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Right. But also kind of liberating.
It is liberating.
Right.
Because if a suitcase full of cash isn't the answer,
Right.
what is? The key is our mental state. How we perceive and react to things matters more than the events themselves. It's like we all have a baseline level of happiness, and it's the fluctuations around that baseline that we experience as joy or sorrow.
Baseline happiness. I like that idea. But is that baseline fixed? Or can we actually raise it over time? And if so, how?
That's a great question. And it leads us to another key concept from the book, the comparing mind. You see, we're wired to compare ourselves to others, which can be a double-edged sword. If we constantly focus on what we lack, we breed envy and discontent. And this is linked to our brain's negativity bias. We evolve to focus on threats. So it takes conscious effort to rewire those pathways toward appreciation.
You're so right. I was just scrolling through social media and an instant envy spiral. It's a constant battle.
It is constant battle for many of us, but here's the empowering flip side. By shifting our perspective to appreciate what we do have, and maybe considering those less fortunate, we can actually boost our satisfaction.
So those gratitude journals might actually be onto something. It's like a mental reset button. Instead of focusing on the gap between what we have and what we want, we're appreciating the ground we're already standing on.
Indeed. Studies have shown that simply reflecting on how things could be worse leads to increased contentment. And this leads us to the idea of training the mind. The book emphasizes that our brains are adaptable. Just as physical exercise strengthens muscles, mental exercises can transform our outlook and increase happiness.
A mental workout routine. But for joy. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It involves identifying and cultivating thoughts and behaviors that lead to happiness, while weakening those that lead to suffering.
Yeah. Like replacing negative self-talk with affirmations. Or consciously focusing on the positive aspects of a situation. It's about actively shaping our mental landscape. Training the mind sounds amazing. But honestly, my mind feels more like an unruly toddler sometimes. Any tips for those of us who aren't, meditation masters?
This actually connects beautifully to another key theme in the book, compassion. The Dalai Lama argues that compassion is our fundamental nature, but it's often overshadowed by anger, fear, or self-centeredness.
This makes sense. Even babies bring joy to their caregivers. It's almost like built-in programming. We're wired for connection and care. But then how do we explain all the conflict and aggression we see in the world? If we're all inherently compassionate, why aren't we all like skipping through fields of daisies holding hands?
That's a great question. The book acknowledges this tension but suggests that much of the conflict arises from what it calls the unbalanced human intellect, the misuse of our intelligence and imagination. As societies became more complex, we relied more heavily on our intellect, sometimes at the expense of our innate compassion.
It's not that compassion is absent. It's more like it's been overshadowed, kind of like how a plant needs the right balance of sun and water to thrive. We need to cultivate the right conditions for our compassion to flourish.
An excellent analogy. Now, this leads us to another crucial aspect of happiness, one that's often romanticized in our culture: intimacy and connection. The Dalai Lama actually proposes a model of intimacy that goes beyond the typical romantic ideal.
This idea of a broader view of intimacy really intrigues me. It feels like it takes some of the pressure off romantic relationships.
Exactly. He encourages deep connections with family, friends, even strangers, advocating for a broader view rooted in our shared humanity.
This resonates with me. It feels more inclusive, more attainable than putting all your happiness eggs in one romantic basket.
And studies confirm that diverse, strong social ties are essential for well-being. It's not just about feeling less lonely, it's about having a support system, a sense of belonging, and a network of people who enrich our lives. It's about recognizing that every connection, even fleeting ones, contributes to our overall sense of belonging and well-being. But all this talk of happiness and connection makes me wonder, how do we deal with the inevitable downsides of life? The tough stuff, the suffering.
That's a really important point. And it brings us to a topic that might initially seem a little, well, grim. Suffering. Buddhist teachings emphasize accepting suffering as an inevitable part of life. Okay. I can see how that might seem a bit of a downer at first glance. But if we're talking about cultivating lasting happiness, we've got to address the elephant in the room. Or maybe the rain cloud on the sunny day?
Exactly. While it might seem counterintuitive, acknowledging this fact actually empowers us.
Instead of being blindsided by pain, we can mentally prepare and build resilience. It's like, if you know a storm is coming, you batten down the hatches and ride it out. But wait, the book goes even further, suggesting that pain, both physical and emotional, can actually serve a purpose. Hold on. So pain isn't just something to endure, it's something we can actually learn from. I'm officially mind blown.
It can alert us to problems, motivate change, and even deepen our connection to others. Think of pain as a messenger, albeit a very unpleasant one, prompting us to pay attention and take action.
Wow, so pain is less of an enemy and more like a very unpleasant messenger. It's like that friend who always tells you the hard truth, even when you'd rather just eat cake and ignore reality.
Exactly. And by understanding the purpose of suffering, we can transform our attitude toward lessening its negative impact. But let's be real, it's one thing to intellectually grasp these concepts and another to actually apply them in the heat of the moment when you're, knee-deep in suffering. Any practical tips from the Dalai Lama on how to navigate those rough waters?
Oh,
The book emphasizes that the path to happiness isn't passive. It requires effort, discipline, and a skillful, balanced approach. There's no magic bullet, but rather a journey of self-discovery and intentional growth.
so no shortcuts to enlightenment, huh? More like a mental marathon than a sprint.
Precisely. And while Buddhist techniques like meditation are helpful, the essence is cultivating compassion, kindness, and awareness in everyday life. It's about integrating these principles into the fabric of our being, not just practicing them in isolation.
It's about making compassion a habit, not just a hobby. Speaking of compassion earlier, you mentioned that the Dalai Lama distinguishes between two types of compassion. What was that all about?
That's a great point. He talks about compassion with attachment, which is often directed towards those we're close to, those we have a personal connection with. It can be a powerful motivator for kindness, but it's also conditional and can be tinged with possessiveness or fear of loss.
So it's like, I'm compassionate towards you because you're important to me, but if you hurt me, that compassion might disappear.
Precisely. Now, the second type of compassion is what he calls genuine compassion, which isn't based on personal preference or attachment. It's rooted in understanding that all human beings share the same fundamental desire for happiness and freedom from suffering.
It's like seeing the shared humanity in everyone, regardless of their background beliefs or actions. It's a compassion that's unconditional and all-encompassing.
Exactly. And this type of compassion, he argues, is the foundation for true happiness and inner peace. It allows us to connect with others on a deeper level, free from the limitations of our own ego and personal biases.
It's like expanding your circle of compassion to include the whole world. That's a beautiful concept, but also a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to cultivate that kind of universal compassion?
That's a question a lot of people ask. The book suggests several practices. One involves simply reflecting on the common humanity we share with others. We all experience joy and sorrow. We all long for connection and meaning, and we all face the challenges of life and death.
It's like remembering that we're all in this together, even when it feels like we're on our own little islands.
Exactly. Another practice involves using our imagination to step into the shoes of others. By visualizing ourselves in their situation, experiencing their joys and sorrows, we can develop greater empathy and understanding.
Have you ever noticed how easy it is to judge or dismiss someone when you're viewing them from a distance? But when you take the time to imagine yourself in their shoes, you gain a whole new perspective.
Exactly. It breaks down those barriers of separation and allows us to connect on a heart level. And this brings us to a crucial point. The benefits of compassion extend far beyond our own personal happiness. Research suggests that cultivating compassion has a ripple effect, positively impacting not only ourselves, but also those around us, and even society as a whole.
Okay, tell me more about them. I'm always up for a good dose of feel-good science.
For example, studies have shown that compassionate individuals are more likely to help others in need volunteer their time and engage in pro-social behaviors.
Like by strengthening our compassion muscle, we're also strengthening the fabric of our communities.
Precisely. And the benefits don't stop there. Compassionate individuals are also found to be more resilient in the face of stress, have stronger immune systems, and experience lower levels of anxiety and depression.
So compassion isn't just good for the soul, it's good for the body too. It's like a mental and physical health booster all rolled into one. But speaking of difficult emotions, how does the Dalai Lama suggest we deal with anger?
Well, he makes a fascinating point about the relationship between compassion and anger. He suggests that anger in its most basic form is often a reaction to a perceived threat to something we care about. In other words, anger can sometimes be a twisted expression of compassion.
That's an interesting perspective. It's like we get angry because we care, but then that anger can take on a life of its own and cause more harm than good.
Precisely. The challenge, he argues, is to channel that anger into constructive action, rather than letting it turn into destructive rage or resentment.
So it's about using our anger as a signal rather than letting it become the boss. It's like, hey, anger, thanks for the heads up, but I'm going to handle this situation with a bit more grace and wisdom.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important point. He emphasizes that overcoming anger and hatred requires more than just suppression. It requires actively cultivating the antidotes: patience and tolerance.
Patience and tolerance, those are virtues I aspire to, but let's be honest, they can be tough to practice in the real world. Any practical tips from the Dalai Lama on how to cultivate those qualities?
He suggests a simple yet powerful practice. When you find yourself getting irritated or angry, pause for a moment and investigate the situation. Ask yourself, is this anger serving me? Is it helping me achieve my goals? Or is it just causing more suffering?
It's like hitting the mental pause button before you say or do something you might regret.
Exactly. And by consciously choosing to respond with patience and tolerance, even in the face of provocation, we're strengthening those mental muscles and creating a more peaceful inner state.
It's about training ourselves to react differently even when our knee-jerk response is to lash out or get defensive.
Precisely.
Mm.
And the more we practice patience and tolerance, the more natural they become. It's like creating a new groove in our mental landscape, one that leads to greater peace and happiness. This all makes sense in the context of dealing with external challenges, but what about those times when we're dealing with our own internal anxieties and insecurities? How does the Dalai Lama address those inner struggles?
That's a great question. The book delves into this as well. The Dalai Lama emphasizes that many of our fears and anxieties stem from an exaggerated sense of self-importance. We worry about what others think of us. We fear failure and rejection, and we get caught up in a cycle of self-doubt and self-criticism.
It's like our ego is constantly whispering in our ear, "You're not good enough," or "What if they don't like you?"
Exactly. And the Dalai Lama suggests a simple yet profound antidote. Cultivate humility.
Humility. That's not a word you hear much these days. It seems like our culture is all about self-promotion and standing out from the crowd. True, but the Dalai Lama argues that true humility isn't about putting ourselves down or denying our talents. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness with all beings and understanding that we're all part of something larger than ourselves.
It's like shifting our focus from me to we.
Exactly. And by cultivating humility, we can free ourselves from the tyranny of ego and experience a deeper sense of peace and connection.
That makes a lot of sense. When we're caught up in our own little bubble of self-importance, it's easy to get swept away by anxieties and insecurities.
Well,
But when we see ourselves as part of something larger, those worries tend to lose their grip.
precisely. And this brings us to another important point that the Dalai Lama makes about dealing with anxiety, cultivating a sense of perspective.
Okay, perspective. I'm all about that. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I try to remember that, the world isn't ending, even if it feels like it in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. The Dalai Lama encourages us to step back from our immediate worries and consider the bigger picture. He reminds us that our problems, however challenging they may seem, are often temporary and that there's always hope for a brighter future.
It's like zoom out and remember that this too shall pass. It doesn't diminish the difficulty of the situation, but it does provide a sense of context and possibility.
Precisely. And he even suggests using humor as a way to diffuse anxiety and gain perspective.
Okay, I love that. Laughter is definitely my go-to medicine for a lot of life's ailments.
He believes that laughter can be a powerful tool for lightening our mental load and shifting our perspective. He often uses humor in his own teachings, reminding us not to take ourselves too seriously and to find joy even in the midst of challenges.
It's like if you can laugh at something, it loses its power to control you.
Exactly. And this brings us to a topic that's often closely intertwined with anxiety. Self-esteem. The Dalai Lama offers a unique perspective on this as well.
Okay, I'm all ears. Self-esteem is one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot,
Mm.
but I'm not always sure what it really means.
He suggests that self-esteem, as it's often understood in our culture, can sometimes be based on fragile foundations. We might derive our sense of worth from external achievements, material possessions, or the approval of others.
So it's like building your self-esteem on a foundation of sand. If those external things crumble, your whole sense of self can come crashing down.
Exactly. He proposes a different approach, cultivating a sense of self-worth that's rooted in our inherent goodness and our capacity for compassion and love.
So it's less about what you do or what you have and more about who you are at your core. It's like recognizing the inherent value of your own being, regardless of external circumstances.
Precisely. And this type of self-esteem, he argues, is unshakable. It can't be diminished by failures or setbacks because it's based on a fundamental truth, that we are all inherently worthy of love and respect.
That's a powerful message. It's like instead of seeking validation from the outside world, we're finding it within ourselves.
Exactly. And this brings us to a concept that might seem a bit paradoxical at first. The importance of self-care in cultivating compassion.
Okay. I'm intrigued. I always thought of self-care as being a bit, well, self-focused. How does that tie into compassion for others?
He emphasizes that we can't pour from an empty cup. In order to genuinely care for others, we need to first take care of ourselves.
That makes sense. It's like you can't be a good caregiver if you're running on fumes.
Precisely. He encourages us to prioritize our own physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being so that we have the energy and resources to extend compassion to others.
So it's not selfish to take care of ourselves. It's actually an act of compassion both for ourselves and for those we interact with. This brings us to something I think a lot of people struggle with. Finding time for spiritual practice. Between work, family, and trying to maintain some semblance of a social life, me time, often feels like a luxury I can't afford.
He acknowledges this challenge, but also offers a reframing of what spiritual practice really means.
Okay, I'm curious. How does he define it?
He suggests that spiritual practice isn't limited to formal meditation or religious rituals. It's about cultivating awareness, kindness, and compassion in every moment of our lives. So it's less about setting aside a specific time for practice and more about integrating those principles into the fabric of our daily lives.
Exactly. He encourages us to see every interaction, every challenge, every moment as an opportunity to practice compassion and grow spiritually.
It's like turning life itself into a spiritual practice.
Precisely. And this brings us to another important point. He emphasizes that spirituality isn't limited to those who follow a particular religion. He believes that basic spiritual values such as kindness, compassion, and honesty are universal and essential for all human beings.
That's a really inclusive message. It's like saying that spirituality is accessible to everyone regardless of their background or belief.
Exactly. And he even suggests that secular ethics based on these universal values can be a powerful force for good in the world.
So it's not about converting people to a particular religion. It's about encouraging them to live ethically and compassionately, whatever their worldview might be.
Precisely. And this brings us to a topic that's often shrouded in mystery. The nature of the mind. Okay, the mind. That's a big one. I'm always fascinated by how our minds work, but I also find it incredibly complex and sometimes confusing.
He offers a perspective that's both insightful and practical. He describes the mind as having two main aspects: the conceptual mind and the non-conceptual mind.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference between those two?
The conceptual mind is the part of our mind that's constantly thinking, analyzing, and judging. It's the part that gets caught up in stories, worries, and plans. The non-conceptual mind, on the other hand, is a state of pure awareness, free from thought and judgment.
So it's like the difference between a busy, chattering monkey mind and a calm, still lake.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that while the conceptual mind is essential for navigating the world, it's the non-conceptual mind that holds the key to true happiness and inner peace.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
When my mind is racing with thoughts and worries, it's hard to feel peaceful or content. But how do we access that non-conceptual mind? Is it something we're born with, or is it a skill we can develop?
He suggests that we all have the potential for non-conceptual awareness, but it's often obscured by the constant chatter of our conceptual minds. He encourages us to cultivate this awareness through practices like meditation, mindfulness, and simply being present in the moment.
It's about quieting the mental noise and tuning into a deeper level of awareness.
Precisely. And by accessing this non-conceptual mind, we can tap into a wellspring of peace, wisdom, and compassion that's always available to us.
That's a beautiful concept. It's like amidst all the chaos and busyness of life, there's this inner sanctuary of peace that we can always return to.
Exactly. And this brings us to a point that's often overlooked in discussions of happiness, the importance of cultivating a sense of meaning and purpose in life.
Okay, meaning and purpose. Those are definitely big questions that I think a lot of people grapple with, especially in today's world, where there's so much pressure to achieve and succeed.
He emphasizes that finding meaning and purpose isn't about achieving some grand goal or leaving a legacy behind. It's about living each day with intention and contributing to the well-being of ourselves and others.
So it's not about becoming famous or wealthy. It's about making a positive impact, however small, in the world around us.
Precisely. And he suggests that even simple acts of kindness and compassion can create a ripple effect of positivity that extends far beyond ourselves.
It's like every act of kindness, however small, is a vote for a more compassionate and loving world.
Exactly. And this brings us to a topic that's often seen as taboo in our culture: death and dying.
Okay, death.
Yeah.
That's definitely a topic that most people would rather avoid.
Yeah.
But I guess if we're talking about living a truly fulfilling life, we can't ignore the fact that it's finite.
He addresses this head-on, emphasizing that death is a natural part of life, just like birth and aging. He encourages us to contemplate our own mortality, not in a morbid way, but as a way to deepen our appreciation for life and motivate us to live more fully in the present moment.
It's like remembering that our time here is precious and that we should make the most of it.
Precisely. And he even suggests that by contemplating death, we can free ourselves from the fear of it and experience a deeper sense of peace and acceptance.
That's a powerful concept. It's like by facing our fears, we diminish their power over us. This makes me think about another practice often associated with facing our inner world: meditation.
Exactly. And that brings us to meditation.
Okay, meditation. I've dabbled in it, but I'll admit I'm not always consistent. My mind tends to wander, and I often find it hard to sit still for extended periods.
He acknowledges that meditation can be challenging, especially for beginners, but he also emphasizes that the benefits are well worth the effort.
Okay, tell me more about those benefits. I'm always up for some good motivation.
He describes meditation as a way to train the mind to cultivate greater focus, clarity, and emotional resilience. He suggests that regular meditation practice can help us to become more aware of our thoughts and feelings, to respond to challenges with greater wisdom and compassion, and to experience deeper levels of peace and contentment.
It's like taking your mind to the gym and giving it a good workout.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that there are many different types of meditation, each with its own unique benefits. He encourages us to experiment and find a practice that resonates with us.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about finding a practice that suits your individual needs and temperament.
Precisely. And he even suggests that simply taking a few moments each day to focus on our breath or to cultivate feelings of gratitude can be a form of meditation.
So even if we can't carve out an hour for formal meditation, we can still incorporate mindfulness and awareness into our daily lives.
Exactly. And these small moments of practice can have a profound impact on our overall well-being.
It's like sprinkling little seeds of mindfulness throughout your day. You know, thinking about meditation and mindfulness in daily life makes me wonder how we can balance our spiritual aspirations with the demands of everyday life. It can feel like you want to live a more mindful, compassionate life, but then you've got deadlines to meet, bills to pay, and a never-ending to-do list.
That's a struggle I think a lot of people can relate to. He offers a perspective that's both practical and inspiring. He emphasizes that spirituality isn't separate from our daily lives. It's about bringing awareness, kindness, and compassion into everything we do.
So it's not about escaping from the world, it's about transforming the world from within.
Exactly. He encourages us to see our work, our relationships, our challenges, and even our mundane tasks as opportunities to practice compassion and grow spiritually.
It's like turning every moment into a spiritual practice.
Precisely. And this brings us to another important point. He emphasizes that true happiness and fulfillment aren't about accumulating wealth, power, or fame. They're about cultivating inner peace, compassion, and wisdom.
So it's not about what you have, it's about who you are.
Exactly. And he encourages us to focus on cultivating those inner qualities rather than getting caught up in the pursuit of external validation.
It's like true happiness is an inside job. This reminds me of something we talked about earlier, that sense of shared humanity, or as he puts it, interconnectedness.
You're absolutely right. He emphasizes that we're not isolated individuals. We're part of a web of life interconnected with all beings and with the planet itself. And this understanding, he argues, is essential for cultivating true compassion and happiness.
It's like remembering that we're all in this together, sharing this journey of life on this beautiful, fragile planet.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important point. He emphasizes that cultivating compassion and happiness isn't just about ourselves. It's about making a positive impact in the world around us.
So it's not just about personal enlightenment. It's about working towards a more just compassionate and sustainable world for all beings.
Precisely. And he encourages us to find ways to contribute to the well-being of others,
Mhm.
however small those contributions might be.
It's like every act of kindness, every effort to make a positive difference is a step towards a more compassionate and enlightened world. We've been talking about compassion for others, but what about having compassion for ourselves, especially in the face of setbacks or perceived failures?
That's a great point, and it leads us to another key concept in the book, gratitude. He emphasizes that gratitude is more than just a feel-good emotion. It's a way of seeing the world, of recognizing the abundance of goodness that surrounds us, even amidst challenges and difficulties.
Or like shifting your focus from what you lack to what you have.
Precisely. And he suggests that cultivating gratitude can have a profound impact on our happiness and well-being. It can help us to appreciate the simple things in life, to feel more connected to others, and to experience a deeper sense of peace and contentment.
It's like instead of focusing on the half-empty glass, we're appreciating the half-full one.
Exactly. And this brings us to a topic that's often seen as a challenge in our modern world, dealing with the constant influx of information and stimulation.
Okay, information overload. That's definitely something I struggle with. It feels like we're constantly bombarded with news, social media, and a never-ending stream of demands on our attention.
He acknowledges this challenge, but he also encourages us to see it as an opportunity to practice mindfulness and discernment. He suggests that we can choose to be more selective about the information we consume, to prioritize quality over quantity, and to cultivate a sense of inner stillness amidst the external noise.
It's about finding that balance between staying informed and protecting our mental and emotional well-being.
Precisely. And he even suggests taking regular breaks from technology, spending time in nature, and engaging in activities that nourish our souls.
It's like hitting the mental reset button and giving ourselves permission to unplug and recharge.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important point. He emphasizes that true happiness and fulfillment aren't about achieving some distant goal or destination. They're about cultivating a sense of peace and contentment in the present moment.
So it's not about waiting for something to happen to make us happy. It's about finding happiness in the here and now. It's not about waiting for something to happen to make us happy. It's about finding happiness in the here and now.
Like stop and smell those roses even if they're growing in the cracks of a sidewalk.
Exactly.
He encourages us to savor the simple pleasures of life, to appreciate the beauty that surrounds us, and to cultivate a sense of gratitude for the gift of each new day.
It's like finding those moments of joy and appreciation, even amidst the everyday hustle and bustle.
Exactly. And this brings us to the idea of transforming suffering, which is a concept that might seem counterintuitive at first.
Because who wants to transform suffering? Right? Most of us would rather just avoid it altogether.
But he suggests that suffering, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, can actually be a catalyst for growth and transformation.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about this transformative power of suffering.
He emphasizes that when we resist suffering, when we try to push it away or deny it, we actually amplify its power over us. But when we face suffering with courage and compassion, when we allow ourselves to feel it fully, we can begin to transform it into something positive.
So it's not about pretending that suffering doesn't exist. It's about finding a way to relate to it differently, to see it as an opportunity for growth rather than a threat to our well-being.
Exactly. And he even suggests that suffering can help us to develop greater empathy and compassion for others, because when we've experienced pain ourselves, we're more likely to understand and connect with the suffering of others.
It's like suffering can crack open our hearts and allow us to connect with others on a deeper level.
Beautifully put. And this brings us to another important aspect of happiness, the importance of cultivating a sense of purpose and meaning in life.
Okay, purpose and meaning. Those are definitely big questions that I think a lot of people grapple with, especially in today's world where there's so much pressure to achieve and succeed.
He offers a perspective on purpose and meaning that's both grounded and inspiring. He emphasizes that finding our purpose isn't about achieving some grand goal or leaving a legacy behind. It's about living each day with intention and contributing to the well-being of ourselves and others.
So it's not about becoming famous or wealthy. It's about making a positive impact, however small, in the world around us.
Precisely. And he suggests that even simple acts of kindness and compassion can create a ripple effect of positivity that extends far beyond ourselves.
It's like every act of kindness, however small, is a vote for a more compassionate and loving world.
Exactly. And this brings us to a point that's often overlooked in discussions of happiness, the importance of cultivating a strong sense of self-worth.
Okay, self-worth.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should look like, what we should achieve, and how we should be living our lives.
He offers a perspective on self-worth that's both liberating and empowering. He emphasizes that our worthiness isn't dependent on external factors such as our appearance, our achievements, or the approval of others. Our worthiness is inherent. It's simply part of who we are as human beings.
So it's not about earning our worthiness. It's about recognizing that we're already worthy simply by virtue of being alive.
Exactly. And he suggests that when we cultivate a strong sense of self-worth, we're more likely to live with confidence, compassion, and joy.
It's like when you know your worth. You don't need to seek validation from outside sources. You can simply be yourself and shine your light brightly.
Beautifully put.
And this brings us to the end of our deep dive into the art of happiness. This deep dive has been truly enlightening. So listener, name what resonates most with you. What will you take away from this exploration of happiness? Could consciously cultivating compassion be a more effective path to happiness than chasing external achievements or possessions? We encourage you to reflect on this question and explore further based on the insights from this deep dive. Until next time, keep diving.